And we get it rolling on a Thursday night after NBA Finals. Game number one goes to the Denver Nuggets. Welcome to the Krueg Show. I am Larry Krueger. That is Dan Coach Emilio. Ned Colletti will be joining us shortly. Frank Red's going to be in the house tonight as well. On the docket, NBA Finals game number one, which goes to the Denver Nuggets, 104-93, and it wasn't even as close as that score sounds. We'll also get into a few other things tonight, I should say, as Bob Myers stepped down this week as the general manager of the Golden State Warriors after 4 titles in 12 years. And there's already a lot of conjecture out there that Bob Myers may head to the broadcast booth. I see people in the chat saying maybe he's headed towards ESPN. I didn't see that. 49er OTAs week number 2 today in Santa Clara. Great day. Had a chance to talk to a number of the Niner assistant coaches. We'll get in. Tom Brady says he's not going to come back and play in the NFL. We'll talk a little baseball as well. Dodgers have the best record in the National League. Texas Rangers with Bruce Bochy playing outstanding ball. And Carlos Correa was the Giants dodge a break there with Carlos Correa. Giants are now 500. They're off today, back at it tomorrow with the Orioles coming to town, 28-28. Giants 17-12 in the month of May. Could be on the verge of calling up Luis Matos to join the mix. Giants are playing well. 111 of 16. Their bullpen, especially the back end, is doing well. So we got a lot to get to, and we welcome in Ned Colletti to our stream as well. Ned, good to see you. How are you this evening?
Hey, good to see you guys. Danny,
hey, Ned.
been a while.
Yeah. Good to see you, Ned.
So, yes, it's like we got a lot to get to. I was saying we got NBA Finals game number 1 goes to Denver 104-93, and Jokic and the Nuggets go up 1-0 in that series. Game 2 set for Sunday, 5 o'clock in Denver on ABC. And we'll get into a couple other things as well, including Bob Myers stepping down as the general manager of the Golden State Warriors. We thought Ned would have a few things to add on that front as a former GM in his own right. And then some baseball as well. Dodgers are
Luis
playing
Matos
well.
Just got word just a second ago. Luis Matos just hit a 2-run homer after a 2-run double earlier in the game. Man.
A lot of people talking about Matos potentially being called up. I was in Salt River in March with my boys sitting on the berm in that beautiful stadium, and Matos just hit a bolt right out of there. And he looked good. He looked good in spring. And the Giants suddenly have on a year where they don't get Judge, they don't get Carlos Correa. Things looked like they were starting off very poorly for the Giants. Suddenly they call up Casey Schmidt, and here comes the youth movement, and the whole vibe changed. And why don't we, what direction do you guys want to start tonight? You want to start on the finals game? You want to start with the Giants? You want to start with Bob Myers? We can go in any direction. What do you guys think?
You got a lot of miles to cover. We can go anywhere you want to go. Just start the engine.
Yeah. Okay. Well, why don't we start with, tonight's basketball game, because, we're coming on after the finals game, man. Denver, Miami. I wasn't sure. I mean, Denver's been understated all year, but man, Jokic was awesome again tonight. 27 points, 10 rebounds, 14 assists. They got 26, 6, and 10 out of Jamal Murray, and Denver goes up 1-0 in this series. What'd you guys think of the game? What do you think of the matchup? Is it going to be a short series, or do you expect Miami to fight their way back like they have basically up to this point?
It's a 5-game series with Denver winning it 6 max.
Pretty definitive.
What do you think,
there, Danny? Pretty definitive there.
Denver's been good. I'll say this: Denver has been kind of overlooked all year.
They're fresh too.
The one thing about tonight in the box score that jumped out to me is Denver shot 16 of 20 from the free throw line. Miami shot 2 for 2. Denver had 18 more free throws than Miami, which I never like to see. That kind of a free throw disparity. It's probably due to stylistic things more than anything. But what can you say? To me, Ned, the one thing about the Nuggets that I think transcends even basketball or, NBA basketball is this. They have, and I always do this exercise at the beginning of the year. Look at a team, whatever sport you're talking about. How many guys do they have that you would say are maybe a year or two before their prime? How many guys do they have who are a year or two beyond their prime? And then how many guys do they actually have that are in those prime years? And the one thing you can say about the Nuggets is they got an entire roster of guys that are in their prime. They're not 19 or 20 and like 3 years from now these guys are going to be good, and they're not 33, 34. Hey, 3 years ago these guys were pretty good. This is their time. And to me, I really believe it doesn't matter if you're talking about football, basketball, baseball. I don't know about hockey. I'll defer to you on that one, Ned. But it just seems to me that you win in pro sports for the most part when you put together a team that's in their prime. And when I think of you, Ned, and Brian, and what you guys did in San Francisco, the year that comes to mind when I make this point is 97, where you guys went and brought in a number of guys, 5, 6, 7 veteran guys. They weren't 20. They weren't 35. They were all in the prime years of their career, and you guys went to the playoffs that year in 97.
I think you make a great point. The ability to have the timing work is huge, and it's rare that you get it. Many times the team is about just about too old, and the season catches up to them because of duration and the grind of a season. Sometimes, like you illustrate 19, 20 years old, they haven't really had that type of experience yet of playing at the highest level, in this case, the NBA. So finding players that are still in the prime physically and have the experience to compete and to deal with all the distractions and everything that happens in the course of any season is invaluable. And I think that, you hit it right there with Denver. I don't watch a ton of NBA, but I certainly watch it this time of year. And, the Lakers, everybody in LA was really, really kind of pumped on the Lakers. If they could stay healthy, they may have a shot. Well, it was 4-0. And it's a very well coached team. They play very well together. Miami too. Everybody playing today is really of a strong caliber. But finding that mix where it's right in the middle, where you don't have too much age and you don't have too much youth, that's a trick, especially in a salary cap league. You mentioned the NHL for a second. Last thing I'll say, the NHL is really tough. That is a hard cap. There's no Larry Bird rule to that. There's no franchise player. There's only one way to not have a player count on your cap on a daily basis. It's long-term injured reserve. So it is tough to win, and it is tough to win more than once because of that.
Mark Hope jumps in on a $10 super sticker. Danny, have you gotten the super sticker?
I still need to get to 1,000, I think, subs before you can start getting those super stickers.
Ned, have you ever been here when somebody's put together a super sticker?
I have not. You guys haven't had me on for a while, so I know
it's been a while.
Behind the times.
Yeah, so Mark Hope with the $10 super sticker, and that's just a flat out donation. So Mark, thank you very much for that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if the networks are loving this NBA Finals, Denver and Miami, but it's sometimes you see a team. I mean, Denver was the best team all year, and to see them here should not be a surprise. We talked about at the beginning of the Warrior run. People were asking me playoff run. Hey, what do you think? What do you think? About the Warriors? And I said, you know what? I just don't see them beating Denver. I mean, there's the regular season record. There's the old saying, you are what your record says you are. And, Denver was a really, really good team in the regular season. They carried it right on through to the playoffs. Their leader is Nikola Jokic, and Jokic is incredibly humble. He's a pass-first guy. He's always looking to set up his teammates. And what a night he had, 27, 10, and 14 assists. Ned, to me, I always feel like in many sports, a team takes on the identity. Sometimes people say of the coach. I think a lot of times the team takes on the identity of the best player on the team. And as that player goes, sometimes, the team goes with him. How important is it in your mind that the best player on your team? I mean, you were the assistant general manager when you guys had Barry Bonds. And I don't know that Barry Bonds was the most humble guy on the team, but how much does the personality type of the team's best player impact the group?
Well, I think it does in every sport, but I really think it does in basketball because of the roster size and how many people play at one time. And also, to some extent, hockey, because you've got a little bit more roster, but you've got 6 playing at a time, including a goaltender. I think when you have that limited amount of play, I think that having having whatever player it is that's the best, whether it's a superstar or just a good player, they kind of show the way. And I think you bring up a good comparison with Denver, a good comment with Denver. That's, again, I'm not an NBA savant, but as I watch good players and I watch leadership take shape, and I see teams get to this stage of a season, you know why they're here, and you know how they got here, and you can see a player or two, and that's the one that is leading the way, and people take that lead. They look around the room before a game, and they look in his eyes, and they know, hey, we got a shot today.
Yeah, I think Denver right now is where the Warriors were in 2015. All guys, mid-20s. Jokic is 27. He's your Curry. Murray's your Klay Thompson. And then you got Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter. Those 4 guys are kind of like when you add the 4 of the Warriors, with Iguodala being the 4th guy. And, they're young, they're hungry because they've been here the last few years, but injuries kept them back. Porter and Murray have been hurt, and they haven't been full strength. Now they're full strength, and they really look the class of the league, and they look to be unbeatable. And I think Miami can hang in there, possibly only because of the coach. I think Eric Spoelstra and Steve Kerr are the top 2 coaches in the league. Spoelstra will get them ready to play Sunday, and they're not going to lay down and make it easy for Denver. But Denver's they're just stacked. And I just don't see how they, unless there's injuries that come upon them in this series, they're going to be tough to beat. And I'm telling you, Denver looks like a team that's going to be at the top for the next few seasons.
You know what? And when you think about it, they've never won an NBA title.
Right.
No.
They've been around a long time. And I think that, sometimes, to going back to Larry's first point about getting everybody in that zone of at their peak and their prime, they've earned the opportunity to be sitting where they're sitting.
Yeah.
No question. I mean, let's look at Jamal Murray. He's had injuries in the past, but now he's 26. He's on top of his game. He had 26 points, 10 assists tonight, 6 rebounds. Then you look at Jokic, 27 points. He's 28. He's 28 years old. And so he's right there in what I would call the super prime of his career, and both their stars are. And they got a great coach. They got 2 huge stars. I mean, think about it tonight. Denver had 29 assists. 24 of them came from Jokic or Murray. So, I mean, that's really incredible. And then I'll say this, the one thing I'll say about this, I expect Miami to play tougher in this series. Cody Martin, the kid that played for Eric Musselman at Nevada, had a rough shooting night. I mean, he shot 1 of 7. Duncan Robinson, one of the best shooters this league's seen, shot 1 of 6. So, I mean, the trio of Martin and Robinson and one other guy, I think, as well. Oh, Struess. Struess shot 0 for 10 from the field and 0 for 9 from 3. Those guys shot 2 of 20. Those 3 guys shot 2 of 23 combined from the field. That's probably not going to happen again. So I expect Miami to bounce back, but Denver, it's Denver's time. I mean, it's Denver's year for sure. Yep. Mark Hope says, thanks, Ned. 1997 was effing epic. And he goes on to say, you gentlemen are looking sexy tonight. There you go. I would love to hear any of Mr. Colletti's thoughts on Bochy's success. We didn't even talk about that yet, but Bruce Bochy has the Rangers at 35-20 out of the chute. Their third baseman, Jung, is having a phenomenal start to his year. Just another, somewhat nameless, faceless big leaguer, but 35-20 for the Rangers, 2.5 game lead on the Astros, 6.5 on the Mariners, 6.5 on the Angels. The A's, Ned, were
without
today,
DeGrom too.
Today, the A's are it's June 1st. I don't know if I've ever seen this before. The A's are 24.5 games out of first place on June the 1st.
That is sad.
I mean, that's amazing. Yeah.
That's sad.
But what do you think? What do you think of what Boch is doing there?
I can't tell you I'm surprised by it. In fact, the people I know that live in Texas and would ask me, "Hey, what's this going to be like?" I says, "You will never question the effort or how good your team is, because he will manage it to the utmost, to the highest level they can play." And no doubt he came back refreshed a little bit. But for the first 2 months of the season, they have been outstanding. And I talked to him a little bit right when he got the job, and he was excited about it. You look at his career. I mean, we've been talking about it for a long time. And the city I live in and the city you guys live in, Hall of Fame credentials for a long time, and showing it one more time. He knows how to manage, and being a former catcher, he knows how to run a pitching staff. And you're right, Danny, no DeGrom. I mean, they're missing the ace of the staff.
We welcome in Frank Red. Frank, good to see you. Frank, do you know Ned, right? Ned?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we were on before together.
Yeah, it was a great time talking to you, Ned. Pleasure.
And you've heard of that guy, Dan Cochimilio, right?
The legend?
There he is.
Dan, the legend?
He's standing.
Standing.
Because he thought there was going to be an anthem, and we did away with the anthem.
I brought my glove. I got my ball.
That's fantastic.
There you go.
Yeah.
We were talking a little baseball because we were in the chat here. We just had a guy ask about Bruce Bochy. Mm-hmm. The Rangers are plus 131 in run differential. They've outscored their opponents by 131 runs. Now, it's an impressive number. Tampa is plus 119. They're second. The number one run differential team in the National League is the Braves at plus 58, and the Dodgers are plus 57. The Rangers are plus 131. They've scored 346 runs in 55 games. I mean, that is an astronomical amount of runs.
Must be those bigger bases.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, the bigger bases. That's the key. But, Bochy. I mean, what can you say about Bochy? Bochy, amazing. Frank, what did you think of the game tonight?
Pretty predictable, to be quite honest with you. I think both teams articulated their vision and their game plan. I just think the Denver Nuggets did it better. If you're the Miami Heat, defensively, I think they were fine. And offensively, they did what they like to do. They were methodical in the half court. They kind of grinded it down, the 24-second shot clock. But Matt Struess was what? Was he 0 for 9? And 0
for 10 overall, but 0 for 9 on threes, I think.
Right. And Caleb, couldn't throw the ball in the ocean. So you got two guys who were outstanding throughout the playoffs, and particularly against the Boston Celtics. And tonight, they just didn't have a good night. So Miami's not going to win unless all their cylinders are working appropriately. Denver can play a pretty good game and still win. Now, if you're Miami, you still feel that you have hope because defensively they were able to, if not stop Denver, they were able to put them on pause a little bit. So defensively, I would probably give Miami a B+, offensively a C, and you're not going to be the juggernaut like the Denver Nuggets with that type of firepower unless all of your guys are playing their best basketball.
Why is Haywood Highsmith and Strus, Max Strus, why are these guys taking 20 shots from the field and Jimmy Butler's taking 14?
Yeah, I think the onus is on Jimmy Butler to be more aggressive. So sometimes you can be too selfless. And at the risk of trying to give your teammates confidence, you got to understand this is your moment. And give them 2 or 3 shots. And if they're not making shots, then you have to be more aggressive. And I think that Coach Spoelstra will talk to Jimmy, maybe his teammates will. They're not going to win unless he's averaging 25 to 30 points a game. So if he does the same thing in game 2 that he did in game 1, there's a real problem. But I expect him to be a lot more aggressive.
Got a couple questions in this chat for Ned. We got this one from Senior Softball Games. Larry asked Ned if he believes the Giants' main goal this year is to compete for a championship or to develop and get major league experience for their top and mid prospects and start focusing on winning next year. What do you think, Ned? Giants out of the chute. I mean, here we are. It's June 1st. They're 500, but they're coming off a month of May where they went 17-12. They're 11-5 in their last 16, and the bullpen's pitching pretty well. But this all came about when they went young with Casey Schmidt. And then, of course, Patrick Bailey is up, and the Giants are in this youth movement. We talked about this beginning of the year. Would the farm system start to spit anything out and produce? And it didn't look too good unless it happened. And sure enough, their system has come to the rescue of Farhan and Kapler, and the Giants have a better record today than the Padres.
I think it's to the question on the screen there. I think it's you're always going to try to win. I mean, unless you're some teams that are bailing out, that's not the Giants' style. I think it's an important year for them, to the second part of the question, to get these younger players some experience. And I think we take so many things in a snapshot and think it's going to last, or it's really good, or it's really, really terrible. The baseball season will sort all of that out. And they have gotten some great play from their younger players. Is it sustainable? It's tough. It's tough to sustain it. I don't care who you are. It's tough to do it on an everyday basis. The best players in the game, in the minor leagues, they say, well, when am I going to get promoted to AA or AAA or the big leagues? When your game resembles a big league game 5 out of 7, 6 out of 7, 7 out of 7 days. That's how you move up. And that's how you win games in the big leagues, where your players are playing at the utmost almost every day. And I think it's tough to do that for young players. It's tough to get into that grind and to do it. Doesn't mean it won't happen. But I think the way they played so far has got to be very, very promising from an organizational perspective. Now, can they sustain it? That's the big question. And do they have enough pitching to sustain it? You mentioned San Diego. I think one of the biggest stories of the year is how poorly they have played and executed, especially the bottom half even the top half of the lineup, where they got the 4 all-stars packed in there. I've seen them a lot. They are just kind of going through the motions right now. I don't know if they got something going on inside the room or not, but Arizona's played well. Can they sustain it? Dodgers, this is the time to get to the Dodgers if you're going to make a move.
Yeah, I agree.
So many people
right
that are
now,
out, especially with the pitching staff.
Yep.
But time will tell what the season's about. But Giant fans got to be excited about what they've seen thus far, especially the month of May.
Hey, Ned, I wanted to throw something out at you because I proposed this last night, and I want to just paint 2 scenarios for you. You're the GM of the Giants. It's July 31st, trade deadline. Your scenario 1, you're one of the 3 wild card teams. Scenario 2, you're 4 games behind the last wild card spot, and there's 4 teams ahead of you. But what do you do in each of those scenarios? Go ahead.
Well, you always canvass everybody to see what they're thinking. And you may run into a team that's just looking to shed salary. It doesn't happen a lot, but sometimes it does. So every situation has got its own feel to it and its own dynamic to it. If I'm the Giants, though, I don't mortgage the future for a player that's going to be walking at the end of the year. I don't do that. I don't think that. I mean, they're a 500 team right now, and they played very well lately. If they're close to 500 or a couple games over 500 when you get to the end of July, and the Dodgers are 4 or 5 ahead of them, or something like that, yeah, okay. But, you have to be realistic with where your team is at. And if they've got some good things going on with their prospects, you don't want to be breaking that up just to give it a run and play a couple of games in the month of October. They built up enough capital that they don't need to do that. It's not like they're the Pittsburgh Pirates that haven't been to the playoffs once or twice in 25 years. No. But you got to be wise with your decision making, and you got to be wise with your evaluation of where your players are at and where your team is at. And a lot is going to change between now and 60 days from now.
Right. So, I mean, as a fan and someone who follows it very closely, my feeling is if you're 4 or 5 games behind the last wild card and there's 3 or 4 teams you got to climb over, and you're really down to like 50 games, you're about 110 games in. So you're pretty close to 55 games, somewhere in that vicinity left. My feeling is sell off some of the guys that might help a team, a veteran that may not be here next year.
Jock
Get rid
Peterson.
of those guys. Yeah, Jock, maybe even a Conforto who can opt out after this year. Maybe some pitchers like Cobb or Wood or DeSclafani, and fill up more of the farm system and just go full youth.
Yes, I would agree with that. I was never really good in math, but I'm going to give you a math lesson here too, to your first part of it. When I look at the standings, and to your example, you said you're 4 or 5 games out of the wild card, but you've got 3 or 4 teams ahead of you.
Right.
I wouldn't say I was 4 or 5 games out of the wild card. I would add up how far I am away from each one of those teams. So you might, in your scenario, you may be 12 games out. Now you can pick up 3 or 4 in a night, but you really, to jump over all those teams, realistically, you're like 12 out. Whatever the team ahead of you is, that distance, the team ahead of them, the team ahead of them, the team ahead of them. So
how many wild cards this year?
3.
So right now, Diamondbacks, Dodgers, and Mets are what? They're the
Dodgers are, Arizona and the Dodgers are tied. So one of them's
So right now, I'm looking at the wild card standings. It shows Dodgers and Diamondbacks tied and they're up by 5, let's say, for the top wild card spot. Then you get the Mets, they're up a game, and then you have Pirates and Marlins, who are both tied at 509 win percentage. And then you have the Giants. The Giants are a half game back of the final wild card, but there's also 2 teams in front of them. So it's going to be, there's a lot of the deadline's going to be interesting too, because this year's deadline may include Shohei Ohtani, and we talked about Ohtani before, and would you trade for him or would you not? And I kind of believe that if you trade for him, you're probably hurting your chances of signing him, because you then would have to deplete your roster, and is he going to want to sign with you if you're not that competitive? So this is a very tough decision for anybody who's contemplating bringing in Shohei Ohtani. We're a half hour into the live stream here. We should tell you that we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, 2 locations, Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week in Marin from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. and they're open Wednesday through Sunday in Emeryville. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Let's hit a couple super chats here. We got Mark Hope says, Frank, are you starting for the Miami Heat in game 2? They need a big man. They need you, Frank.
In my mind,
if Coach
they need you down on the block to guard Aaron Gordon.
I mean, it's funny watching Aaron. I'm watching this kid since he was 12 years old, and to see what he's become is pretty impressive. I mean, he's either the best or the second best glue guy in the NBA. I mean, certainly Draymond Green, I think it's still that guy. But after Draymond, I think you would look at Aaron Gordon and say, yeah, he's the guy who holds everything together. He's the guy who wants to do all the dirty work. And what's really impressive about Aaron is when he first came in the league, I don't think that he was willing to be the player that he has become. But I think he found out that winning teams need players like him. Is very lucrative. And on a national level, if you win, you will get the accolades and the reverence that you deserve. And I think he's on the cusp of possibly being an all-star.
No doubt. I've always loved his game. Heck, I thought he was involved in one of the greatest dunk contests I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah, that was
between
awesome.
him and Zach LaVine. And, of course, Aaron Gordon's a pride of the Bay Area. Midi High School. He was a Midi Monarch down in the South Bay once upon a time. We've got Trock, who's become a Krueg Show YouTube member. I always give a little clap to my newest members. Thank you, Trock, for joining the Krueg Show Army. We got a couple on here. One non-super chat from MF who said, "Is Ned going to be on the HBO Barry Bonds documentary?" Have you done any Q&As for the Bonds doc?
I haven't been asked, but I read about that the other day. I would love to be included in it. I've got what I think is a kind of unique perspective on Barry that a lot of people probably don't know. But I found him to be really, really an interesting guy, but really a good guy when put in the right situation. And once he trusted you and he knew you weren't out to try and figure out a way to make $1 off him, he did so many wonderful things in my company that he would also say, I don't want anybody to know.
It's so funny. I've always defended Barry Bonds, and it's because he never, ever abused me in any way. When I would ask him to do stuff, he would either say yes, or if he would say no, he would say, Krug, I'm out right now. And he would give you, and he wasn't, people have painted a picture of Barry as difficult, and I'm not saying that he wasn't. And I'm sure everybody's got their own experiences, but he always treated me fairly. If I asked him a serious question about the game after the game, he would give me an answer. And then, and a lot of times he would wait. If he saw there were people there, he'd put up like a one finger, like, hey, give me a second. Let these people walk by. So I don't want to start holding court because I'm answering your question, but I respect you enough to answer your question. And I always really appreciated that. To me, these documentaries, by the way, they're really interesting. And Ray Ratto, my good friend Ray Ratto, who I've known for years, you guys all know Ray, and he was talking about Willie Mays in the Willie Mays documentary, which is playing all the time on NBC Sports Bay Area. And Ray is such a genius and is so good at summing up a player. And when it came time for him, and it's the final quote in this hour-long retrospective on Willie Mays, and in Ray's line, I'll never forget it. He goes, Willie Mays was the signature player in baseball's most talented era. And he's totally right. I mean, if because there were different eras, but no era was more talented than the 1960s. That's when the depth of talent was greatest. You had the game fully integrated at that point. You have players from all over the globe. The depth was there. The talent was there. And to me, that was just such a perfect way of saying it. There were, maybe Aaron might have been a better hitter, or maybe there was somebody, Maury Wills, maybe you could argue was a better runner, or, different aspects. But Mays was the signature player of baseball's most talented era, and he was just a little bit better than everybody else at basically all facets of the game.
He was the definition of a 5-star, 5-tool player.
No doubt.
Six-tool player.
6-tool, really, yeah.
If I said that
to knowing and being able to anticipate and play the game brilliantly, was also part of his game.
If you were to sum up, if I said to you, give me a Ray Ratto, I'm not asking you to be genius here, but if someone said to you, Ned, give me a comment on Bonds. Well, what are you looking for? I've worked with him. I know him. I could talk about stories. I could give you anecdotes. Just give me what you think would be the comment that would sum up the greatness of Barry Bonds for somebody who's going to see this decades later, who maybe never went to a game that he was at, never saw him play. I mean, that's what these retrospectives do. I was born in 1970. Mays finished in the early 70s. I never saw it. But my father, every time we talk about Mays, he'd be like, simply the best, just the best. And there's several comments, Joey Amalfitano, Herman Franks, and others who would get to their comments, and then they would just be like, just the best, just absolutely the best. And those guys are baseball, very, very smart baseball men. Ned, if I say Barry Bonds, if you were to sum up Bonds to somebody who hadn't seen him, would you talk about his hitting? Would you talk about his fielding? Would you talk about his something to do with his statistics, something to do with his ability to elevate? What jumps out to you?
I think I would say he is was a very complicated person who was a genius at all facets of the game of baseball.
I think
smartest hitter I've ever been around.
Yeah.
Smartest.
Ned, I often thought if he really wanted it, he could have probably done 40, 45 years in a row.
Oh, he could do whatever he kind of wanted to do at a certain point in time. And he was the best I ever saw on a daily basis. And the genius of Maddox as a pitcher, and the genius of Bonds as a defensive player, where he doesn't get a whole lot of credit. Started at center field, ended up moving to left, kind of a position you don't think about who are the great players. Best left fielder I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Easily the best left fielder I've ever seen.
In 93, to me, that was the greatest left field I've ever seen.
Yeah. But just, a complicated guy. And, obviously, rubbed the media the wrong way, which is probably some of the reason, if not the entire reason, he's not in Cooperstown. They hold the vote, and for whatever reasons, but I could go on and on about this player, and he did so many good things that he wanted nobody to know about, as I alluded to earlier, that it was impressive to me. And all he asked me, he says, make it turnkey. Let me know what the deal is. Who's needs to be said hello to, or what they're going through, and just keep it close. I don't want this getting out. It was almost like he didn't want people to know what a good guy he could be.
Right. Well, yeah, and seriously, that might have been in some ways his edge. There's a couple things I would say. Barry Bonds may not have been Rickey Henderson, but he could take any base he wanted in any situation, almost to the bitter end. That's how genius he was as a base stealer. Any singular base he had to have, he had. There was a day also at Oracle Park, and I'll never forget this, and we see it in San Francisco maybe once or twice a year, where they just get that high sky, and left field in maybe like at the end of a day game can be just treacherous, especially in the summer. There was a game, and it was that kind of a day, and there were 3 balls dropped by the opposing left fielder in one game, and none of them were line drives. They were just high, majestic fly balls to the track. 3 of them dropped. It was that kind of a day. The announcers are talking about it. An inning later, Barry Bonds out there in left, just an absolute majestic shot hit to him in left. He circles under it, and made the catch clean on maybe one of the most difficult days to catch fly balls. He had true genius about him. But the moment, if you're saying to me, there's that moment, what's the moment? You can point to all kinds of things. I don't know if you were there that day, Ned, or if you had moved on to the Dodgers, but it was Barry's birthday, and it was Giants Diamondbacks, and Barry and somebody singled to left with a guy on second in a tie game in the ninth.
Oh, he walked him.
And Barry threw he came sprinting up, picked it up on the run, dead throw, one hops the catcher, boom, boom, tag, out. Threw the guy out at the plate. It was so genius because he didn't have a great strong arm, but he got rid of it so fast that it was like he compensated for not having the super strong arm. It was accurate. He released it incredibly fast, and he got it there, threw the guy out. He led off the bottom of the inning.
Yep.
And I'm standing there. I'll never forget this. I got Skip Bayless standing right on my right. I got Bruce Jenkins standing on my left. We're standing there in the press box, and we're like, and I said to Bruce Jenkins, man, Barry Bonds, what a play, huh? Knowing Barry, he'll probably park one right here. And he's like, Bruce Jenkins, like, yeah, seriously. First pitch, boom, gone. Game over. And we all go down to the clubhouse. I go down there. I gotta go listen to what he says. So I go down there, and he goes, I don't play. He goes, it's my birthday. I don't play extras. It's a great line, man. It was a great line. Were you still with the Giants then,
Yes.
Ned? Or
Yeah, I do recall that.
do you remember that?
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing.
He could do stuff that was unbelievable. You know, as I think back to it, I used to talk to our hitting coach, Joe LaFay, about it all the time. The toughest thing for a hitter to do is to maintain his swing, stay in the groove, no matter what the dynamics of a game or a week are. And I think in 04, he walked intentionally well over 100 times. And that he could continue to maintain the beauty of the swing, the timing of the swing, was one of the most amazing things I had ever seen. And Joe LaFay echoed all of that. I think he walked 120 times intentionally, where he didn't even have to judge a pitch. And I think that's phenomenal. And you look at the stolen bases, as people will look back on his career, they'll hear about the suspected PEDs and all of that, and the surliness from time to time. And they'll know the number of 762. They'll be shocked by the number of stolen bases a power hitter had. And they will be shocked at walking 120 times in a season intentionally.
Intentionally, yeah.
I mean, it's
how about the night?
Did he have over 200 walks that year?
How about the night Showalter walked him intentionally with the bags loaded?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hey, Larry, before I forget this thought, when you asked, or the question came up in the chat, will he be part of the HBO doc? You got that 1 minute clip of the beginning of Ned's answer about having things that he hopes he could be part of it, and he's got stories. You should make that into a short and put that out, so that it gets maybe it gets back to HBO or something, and get that out there in Twitterville and all that.
I'll have my son put it out there for us. Mark Hope says, Ned, what happened to East Coast hockey in 2023?
Oh, how about it? The big bad Bruins, Toronto, Tampa. We'll see, but you talk about the NBA finals, and maybe the networks aren't buzzing about the two teams in it. Certainly in the NHL, the same thing with Florida, Florida and Vegas playing. But those two teams have flat out earned it. They have flat out earned it. To win 16 games and to be as physical as they are for the last 6 weeks with another 2.5 to go, you gotta see a locker room this time of year and see what it looks like and see what people go through to post at this time of year. It's phenomenal. It is the best for me.
I'm just sitting here getting a history lesson on the greatness of some of these players, particularly Barry Bonds. And I've talked to a lot of professional athletes and played against a lot of them and stuff like that. But all of my heroes generally are still very active and very prominent. And when I think about Barry Bonds, unfortunately, for someone that great, I mean, he is like Hank Aaron of his generation, if you will. And he's very quiet. Like you're talking, Ned, about some of the wonderful things that he does in society, and no one knows about it. And I'm just thinking that, like, some of the younger baseball fans out there, it's almost a crime not to hear him revered like Hank Aaron was when I was a child. And that's really disappointing to me, because that enriches the game,
No doubt.
And we're losing because this great player outside of the San Francisco Bay Area, I mean, he's an afterthought to a lot of kids unless they're really into baseball. And that's unfortunate. I don't know if it's Major League Baseball, it's Barry's own deal, but I mean, he's one of the monuments. He's one of the pillars of his generation of baseball history. And we don't get a chance to revere his experience, his knowledge, and everything that comes with what he did on the baseball field. And that's a little disappointing to me.
Amen. I've been teaching at Pepperdine University for 6-7 years. I teach sports leadership classes there. In fact, I just got an honorary doctorate, Larry.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Yes.
Oh, that's great.
You gave the commencement address. But, irregardless of that.
Where do they have it? Right there on the cliff there in Malibu?
Yes.
Wow.
When I talk baseball and the great players that have come through the game, I get so many blank stares. I mentioned Barry Bonds, and if it's not a student from the Bay Area or maybe a Dodger fan, I could be talking about anybody. I could be talking about an astronaut. They don't have any idea who I'm talking about. They may know the astronaut more. And the other piece of it, and I'll ask you all the same question. Whoever it is that you revere, that you respect, and you've never met them, how much of it is because of how they are portrayed in the media? That's a lot of, unless we know somebody, that's where our opinions are generated from.
Mm-hmm.
Good guy, bad guy, good gal, bad gal, whatever it is. The media sets the tone for it. They're the conduit, because we don't know everybody we admire or we like to meet or this or that. And I think Barry's media presence was below average. Right. And I think, and he didn't care. I talked to him about it a handful of times. He says, all I want to do is be known as a baseball player. That's all I need to be evaluated on. I don't want to be evaluated on how many interviews I do or how much time I spend with Sports Illustrated or any of that stuff. I saw what they did to my dad. I saw what they did to my godfather. I don't need any of that. I just want to be evaluated as to how I play the game. And so when things got ugly there for a while, and when all the accusations started to fly, media, and I've never talked to anybody about it because I don't want to get into it with them, but they couldn't wait, in my opinion, to take it to him.
Oh, I know. No, there's no question. There's no question. I admire Barry. I admire Barry for the fact that he did, in a world where everybody cares about what everybody thinks, he didn't. And I admire that. I also say this, I love my father. He's no longer with us, and I miss him every day. If my father had been dragged through the media because of some flaw that he had, like alcoholism or whatever, and he was treated poorly, I'd remember it and have a grudge. I'd have a chip on my shoulder for the rest of my life for those people. I remember, I don't have any issue with Barry. To me, you have to understand, where someone's coming from, and you can only understand what somebody's coming from if you understand their story and their life story and what they experienced.
Very true.
And we're in a world now where we're very sensitive about everything, but not when it comes to trying to understand why people don't do what we want them to do. And yeah, it would have been nice. It would have been easier for the Giants. It would have been easier for Larry Bear and Peter McGowan to market the club. It would have been easier probably for you and Brian to build the club if Barry had been a little bit more jovial and this and that. But you know what? He lived through a decade of his dad getting traded and all kinds of rumor and innuendo. And he just was like, you know what? I'm not playing along with it. And he was in a position to dictate the terms, and he took advantage of it. And to me, I fully understand it. I really do.
He let his game do his talking.
Yeah, he let his game do his talking. But also, it's like if somebody hurt somebody that you loved, and you saw it, you would probably change the way you responded to those people. So I
Barry
never questioned it.
Struck me as, I mean, Ned, you would know him obviously a lot more, but to me, you look at people's personalities. Some guys are, they're outgoing and they're gregarious, and Bond seemed to me like he just had more of a quieter personality that just wanted to be. He wasn't the rah guy. He was just the guy that just went out and did his job and kind of said, hey, I'll let my game speak for myself, and I'm going to leave it between the lines. And when I'm done with my job for the day, I'm done. And some guys, like we all love Will Clark. Will Clark's a gregarious guy, and he's going to let you know how he feels, and he's going to use some explicitives, and he's going to, and everybody loves Will for that. But because Barry's personality is different, they think he's a jerk. And, sometimes people just are quieter.
And also he's the face of the PED era because he was the best player, not because he was the only player. I mean, how many times do you hear Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa dragged for performance-enhancing drug use compared to Barry? And, I mean, and is there a reason for that? It's because, Sammy played along a little bit more, and McGuire was, a little bit more jovial, and Bonds was like, you know what? Love me, hate me, do what you want, but I'm not playing along. By the way, Scott Fowler says home run Barry chant was one of my best sports memories. Oh, there's lots of people walking around with Barry Bonds memories of home runs. One of the big stories of the week was that Bob Myers stepped down as general manager of the Warriors. And Ned, you wanted to comment on this, and I'm sure Frank, you'd love to share some thoughts on it as well. I don't know that we got an answer at the presser of why he wanted to say goodbye. 4 titles, 12 years. I consider Bob Myers a personal friend, and outside of yourself, Ned, there may not be an executive that I found more fun to talk to about a sport. He's very humble. He asked you about yourself the same way you would ask me about myself. And it wasn't like for effect. It was like, hey, how you doing? What's going on in your world? Or, hey, I would be real into the NBA draft. He'd be like, Larry, you're probably more into the NBA draft than I am. So why don't you tell me who you like in this upcoming draft before I tell you, answer your question. I mean, there's a every man, a humility to Bob Myers where he remembers when he was the kid in the upper deck or, the upper levels at the Coliseum, because he was a kid from Monte Vista, grew up in the Bay Area rooting for the Warriors, and just was fortunate enough to run the franchise for a while and help add 4 Larry O'Briens to the trophy case. But Ned, give me your perspective on Myers and his decision to step down. I know you contacted me this week and we're like, man, I wouldn't mind commenting a little bit on that.
I have so much respect for who he is, which is more important than what he's done. But who he is and what he's done, pretty special. Not easy to win. Not easy to win once. Certainly not easy to win 4. And, I think Bill Walsh, the great Niners coach, may have said it that, you've got about a 10-year run in you. in any place. And then it's time to move on. And, I think he was the GM for 11 years. I think he was assistant GM for 1 at the outset. And I think, I've known Peter Guber for a long time, since he was part of the ownership group of the Dodgers and obviously the Warriors. And I remember, him telling me how good Bob Myers was and how smart he was. He loved this guy. And, I never forgot that. When I think about the seat that people sit in when they are the leader of an organization in any sport where they are in charge of the players, the team, and all of that, I think it's the most unique position there is in sport. Because I think if you think about a GM, you think about Bob, and you think about, okay, did he deal with players? Yes. Does the coach deal with players? Yes. Does the owner? Maybe yes, maybe no. But it's up to him to figure out who's going to be on that team. So you start there. Coaches. Who deals with the coaches every day? The GM or the president in his case. Who deals with that? Players, coaches, every day. Responsible for the combination. Okay. Owners. The owner may have a relationship with a coach or with a player or two, but not to the extent, typically, that the leader of the organization on the talent side has. So that job there has got the players responsible for them and all of the coming and goings and conversations that take place during the course of a year. Numerous. Every personality, everything. Same with coaches. Same with owners. Same with agents. Who deals with the agents? Maybe an owner once in a while, but by and large, it's the responsibility of that position yet again. Okay? Who thinks about, doesn't probably make decisions based on it, but who has to be cognizant of marketing and selling tickets and having an enjoyable team for your fan base. You would never make a move to bring a player in here who couldn't help you win to sell another ticket, but you also have to be cognizant of that. I think the scope of these positions, when done right, are unlike any other position in professional sport, because you are in the spoke of the wheel completely, with everybody coming to you on everything. Every aspect of a team is coming to you. Your trainers, your assistant coaches, your PR people, your owner, your agents, the whole group is going to come and knock on the door. And you've got to be able to handle all of that and then win 4 times. Really? How difficult is that? And you're talking about, I don't even think he's 50 years old yet.
No,
he's
he's 48.
And so, he's got a pretty good set of, jewelry there already. And financially, he's probably doing pretty well. Maybe time for another challenge. Maybe time to take a breath, because it is a relentless career that you have. It's not fantasy. It's real. And every day you are judged in the paper, whatever that means to you. But every day people know if you're good or you're not. And most of the time when teams win, the players get the credit. And most of the time when a team loses, the GM hears about it. Even though the GM hasn't made a basket or hasn't had an at bat or made a pitch. So maybe it's just time for a break and to take a breath and to know how much he's accomplished. And I'm sure every organization's got its politics and it's got its conversations that, you kind of roll your eyes to. We've all been in those rooms. But I think what he's done is one of the great, probably one of the great decades plus of anybody in the history of Bay Area sport.
I want to get all your guys' thoughts on this, but there's a couple things that just really come to mind. One, Bob Myers in the presser reveal, or it was in the presser, or maybe in an interview that he did, in the last week, expressed that Joe Lacob, the owner, may call him 15 times in a day.
Exactly.
15 times.
Hey,
15
Larry,
times, Ned. I guarantee you, I don't know. I mean, we've talked about a lot of things. I've never asked you this question. I feel very confident in saying that Peter McGowan never called you 15 times in a day, and it was not regular behavior. That would wear me down. Would that have worn you down if Frank McCourt, when you were the GM of the Dodgers, if he had called you 15 times in a day, if Peter had called Brian 15 times in a day, I think
a trading deadline day.
Yeah, but I think Joe Lacob has driven. I think Joe Lacob is having an owner that is that hands-on.
Larry, you're hitting the nail on the head. I read something this morning and I said to myself, man, I know why he's leaving, because he said, I'm going to miss calling Bob 15 to 20 times a day. And he goes, for the life of me, I can't figure out why he wants to leave. And when I read that comment, that quote, I says, this man does not know enough people skills to know that he's an irritant driving people. You can take that for a few years. But 12 years he's been in the position. He's reached the pinnacle. And he's got young kids, and he's like, he said it at the presser. This job requires all your energy and time and dedication to be successful. And if you can't do that and commit to that, you shouldn't be doing it. I think he's just worn out. Hey, the Warriors themselves got worn out after 5 straight trips to the finals, and they needed a break, and they needed a reset, and it took them 2 full years. Human beings need resets. A GM's job is not, he doesn't get days off in the offseason.
There's no off. The game stops.
Yeah.
But the business of the sport doesn't stop.
Right.
Frank, what do you got?
15 times. That's a lot. That seems excessive. Frank, what did you think when you saw Myers step down? Give us your thoughts.
It was pretty emotional for me, and I've been in Bob's presence, but I've never met him. But I know people like him, and they're very special. See, when I see Bob Myers, I see someone who has handled privilege the right way, and as a result, he is so revered. He has the ability to see things from everybody's perspective. When someone has privilege, you assume that it's easy street. And there's this connotation even about Joe Lacob's kids. And we don't, like I don't know them, but there's a connotation that things are easy. And Bob Myers said, you know what? I recognize that I've been given a great foundation and a great opportunity. And what I'm going to do is show everybody that I got a break, but look how hard I work, because that resonates to everybody. And when you see him hugging players, not the commercial hug and you let it go. No, I'm talking about you haven't seen your grandfather in 5 years and you don't want to let him go. When Klay Thompson got hurt, Bob Myers cried. He was crying. Or was that KD? Or maybe both of these guys. But this is who he is. And as a black man who seen other great players, tremendous talent, I mean, outside of Grant Hill, a lot of guys won't get these opportunities. And for some people, it's okay that they don't get these opportunities. Bob Myers is a guy who cares. Like I said, I've never met him, but how many of his former clients has he put to work? How many? A lot. That means something, because when he came out of UCLA and he was looking for clients, nobody was like, hey, yeah, Bob. No. He had to sell himself as a person who had that client's back time and time and time and time again. And then when you look at what he's done as an executive, flawless, unbelievable. And I just think after 12 years, like, he has no gray hair. He probably wants to, let a couple of grays out, man. You know what I'm saying? Be like everybody else. And I actually think also I could see him running Disney. I could see him doing something like that. Bob Iger, hopefully I pronounced his name correctly, he came out of retirement because there wasn't somebody there who he felt was going to be able to take Disney to the next level. When you look at ESPN potentially going its own way, when I think of somebody who can negotiate all of those worlds in partnership, I think of a Bob Myers. I don't think at this stage of his life he's looking to work for people. I think he wants to build partnerships. And we look at the NBA expanding all of these alternate media opportunities. When he takes a breath, I think those are going to be the things that really interest him, not necessarily working for someone. And, when I think of, Joe Lacob, that was Bob Myers' moment. And I don't know Mr. Lacob. I don't know. I've never met him. And he's very successful. You can learn a lot from him.
He never should have sat down there and talked.
But he consciously or unconsciously took that moment away from Bob Myers. After a guy's won 4 championships in 10 years, he goes, well, we're going to continue to win, because that's what good organizations do. You might feel that. You might feel that. You might believe that. But that was wrong. And Bob Myers kind of looked at him like this, like, oh, that's why I'm not here anymore. Yeah. So I could talk about Bob Myers for for multiple hours, because I'm very, very impressed with him. But the most impressive thing to me about him is his ability to be aware of his position and how that resonates with other people who maybe don't look like him. I really, really respect that. And even Larry, he's kind of that Gary Radnish type of situation where, kind of self-deprecating. He's talking, this guy knows the draft. He knows players, but yet he's talking to you and saying that you might know more about that than he does. That's not by mistake. That's who he is as a person. So I'm sad to see him go, but at the same time, I'm really excited about what lies next for him. And if that's just being a husband and a father, then that's great. But I think that there's some other opportunities and some other interests out there that will arise over a period of time that he'll be a part of.
Yeah, I think the
Thanks,
Golden
Frank.
State Warriors
educating me on how I was feeling. Thank you.
Very good.
Right on.
Excellent way to put it, Frank.
Thank you.
I think the Golden State Warriors right now are going into a period where the Dallas Cowboys were in 1995, 1996 era. 95 was their last Super Bowl, and Jerry Jones said, he brought in Barry Switzer to win that last Super Bowl, and it was like, we don't need Jimmy. We can just do this, and I can do this, and we're going to keep winning. And they haven't won a Super Bowl since, and I don't think they've been to one, have they?
It's the Danny. The saying is, a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing, and that's what and people say. Bob's sons, because there's a lot of talk that, or I should say, Joe's sons may wind up running the Warriors, and there's indications that maybe Kurt or Kent Lakeup, Joe's sons, may wind up being the new general manager. And people say, well, Kurt Lakeup was an assistant with Stanford basketball, or he had some basketball background. Okay. Jerry Jones played college football at Arkansas. Doesn't mean that he should have fired Jimmy Johnson and made himself and his son the general manager. One of the things I've always noticed about your run as a general manager, Ned, your son is a sharp kid. I've talked to him. He had a burgeoning career in baseball. You didn't make him your assistant GM. Now, I'm not saying that Lou couldn't do it, but you didn't make him that. Brian's got boys. None of them that I saw ever were you, the assistant GM. Never. And to me, it's just, to me, I think owners sometimes, yeah, they're footing the bill, but they can overstep their bounds and they can go beyond. And I don't know how you feel about nepotism in the game. Obviously, there's a lot of people who do hire their kids. There are second generation and third generation, players and managers, and it's not like it never happens, but it takes a unique situation for that to work. And I would love to know what the record is. How many sons of GMs have won World Series? How many sons of GMs have won NBA titles? How many sons of general managers have won Super Bowls? I'm not saying it can't be done. Heck, Kyle Shanahan's dad is Mike Shanahan. Sean McVay won a Super Bowl. John McVay was one of the great general managers in the history of the NFL. Maybe the greatest, arguably the greatest general manager in the history of Bay Area sports was John McVay. And his son, Sean, has gone to LA and become a great young head coach and has a Super Bowl ring. So I'm not saying by definition it can't work. I just think that for every example of it working, there's probably many examples where it doesn't work. But Ned, were you ever tempted? Was Brian ever tempted? Did you ever have to push back on 30 owners of the Giants? One of them said, "Hey, you know what? My kid would be a great general manager for you, or a great assistant to you guys." I don't remember you hiring a young Peter McGowan or a young Bear or a young Nibby, or I don't remember that. Maybe I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. But what's your thought on this, Ned? Because these are very coveted jobs, and it's viewed on the outside world as, man, I want to be there. And a lot of times an owner's just a rich guy until he owns a team. And then he's a personality and a person and beyond. He's not just another rich guy. And a lot of times they look at it from afar and say, well, my general manager didn't make all the right moves, and I would have done this move and that would have been better. So I should be the general manager. I mean, it's a huge stretch. Give me your thoughts on it, Ned.
This is, there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah. But I mean, you're the ideal person to speak on it because you didn't bow to this in any way that I know of. And I know, I got a pretty good idea of what I'm talking about on this front. What do you, where are you on this?
I had it once in a while where somebody'd say, hey, my daughter, my son wants to do this and do that, and I would say, well, are they willing to start as an intern? Are they willing to take, if there's 99 people in the department, are they willing to be number 100? If they're not, I have no interest. My son played, drafted one time, and he wanted to get in the game, and he'd been around the Giants for 10 years before he got to that stage of his life. And I never said a word to anybody. He went to Dick Tidrow and he went to Brian and said, hey, I would like to start a career in the game. And they sent him to Arizona in the summer league, 110 degrees. And they paid him
I know too well.
They paid him $1,000 a month. And that's what he made for 2 years. And he scouted in the fall in Arizona and in the spring, and he coached in the summer. And no special privilege, provided opportunity, but at the lowest level. And I mean, $1,000 a month, this wasn't 100 years ago.
Right.
It was, and that's what he did. And, that I'm good with stuff like that. But if somebody wants to groom somebody and put them in a position that they're not prepared for, it's not right for anybody, including that person. Because you know what players know? Players know everything.
Mm-hmm.
And players know who can and who can't. And if any organization puts somebody in place due to nepotism and they don't know what they're doing, you have lost that team. They run the players run the sport. And you have lost that team if you don't do it the proper way in all facets of it. I had a handful of times in my career, and I'd say, sure, willing to give them an opportunity, but they will start at the very, very beginning. It's like people that want to own a restaurant and have never worked in a restaurant, never ordered food, never cooked, never ran a desk, never ran a register, never led anything, and they're going to own a restaurant. Well, good luck on that one too. You have to know the business and have spent the time and been challenged by all sorts of adversity, including a living wage or the lack of a living wage for a while to get it. And for those who do it the right way, they exceed all expectation, and they know people will say, well, they're only there because of their mom or their dad. And that's not good. I was a baseball teammate of Mike Shanahan. And, I'm proud of it. And we grew up in the same neighborhood, and we played sports and went to the same high school. He's a couple years older than me. But, Kyle just wasn't handed that gig. Kyle put his time in too to figure out how you do it. Because those who do it the right way, they don't want it for free, and they don't want to embarrass their family or anybody with their success without humility. And Frank was great with talking about Bob Myers with the humility, and yourself too, Larry. Success without humility is worthless. And so those that had the opportunity, I think, the opportunity is fine. Start at the bottom, work your way through it, and be prepared to do more than everybody, to be equal with everybody.
Mark Hope. Yeah, Frank, go ahead. You wanted to jump in with a thought.
No, every time Ned, like I said, I've listened to you for years, and having this opportunity to just have you, regale us about your wisdom, your intelligence, and your knowledge, and not only baseball but in life in general, is so enjoyable for me, because sports has been, beyond my mother's love, the most important thing to happen to me. If it wasn't for sports, I would not have gone to college, because nobody in my family went to college. I would not have gotten a master's degree. I would not have gotten degrees beyond that. It's because the variables and the components of that experience has really helped me. So, and again, I've been fortunate to the point where I've met a lot of people from a lot of different environments, and I'm privileged to call them friends. Like Larry and I are friends, man. This is not about sports talk. We're friends.
Right.
Been friends for 25 years. And, it's just, again, as you said, success without humility is really nothing. It really isn't. And that resonates with me. It really does. So thank you.
Mark Hope says, can you guys expand on Larry's Joe Lacob, Jerry Jones comparison? I just was saying that, Jerry Jones, moved Jimmy out and moved his son Steven in, and one of the comments here on the board is from Kyle McKiernan, who says, Larry, talk about how Joe Lacob has a board on the wall. He has a draft board, Ned. Have you ever had an owner? I know Frank McCourt had he was very passionate, let's say. I'm not sure but I mean, if you walked into Frank's office and he had a board for the amateur draft, it would blow your mind, wouldn't it? If you walked into Peter McGowan's office and he was like, you know what? I think I know what shortstop we need in the 5th round in June, you'd look at him like he was nuts, right? I mean, so part of being the general manager is to manage expectations. Frank totally hit on it. When Joe Lacob sat down, first of all, he never should have sat down. He should have just let Bob have his moment and have another press conference on another day to address anything you wanted to address.
Amen.
That was Bob's moment. Let him have it. Instead,
Amen.
there was this awkwardness between the two, and Joe totally outshined Bob in some ways. But Bob. I mean, Joe's got opinions, and Joe said at one point, "We're going to continue to win." And what Frank alluded to there is what he really should have said is, "Bob is spectacular. Bob has done an incredible job. If we can have half as much success going forward without him as we had with him, we're going to be a very lucky group." My expectation is that we win every year, but I know guys like Bob have really had a huge hand in us doing that, and I don't know if it can be done. We're going to find out as we chart these. As we go through these uncharted waters to this point. We don't know. We hope, but we don't know. Instead, he's like, "We are going to win," and I thought to myself, well, hearing that might be the reason
it is
Bob is leaving, because Steph is 35 and Clay is 33 and Draymond is 34 or whatever. These guys are now all past their prime, and it's basketball. It's not like other sports where you might be able to find some way to make it all happen. No, it's the ultimate players league, and the stars make the team. And when the stars age out, you have to get lucky in the lottery. I mean, it's fortune. It's good fortune. And you need to put together a series of good transactions in a row to get to the point they were at. And for Joe to come out and say, "We are going to win," almost like a petulant child says, "I want my toy." And it's like, okay, I'm insulting Joe because I'm calling a guy who's a self-made billionaire a petulant child. But there's a petulant child side of his expectations. And I think that Bob Myers may just be reading the room and going, wait a second, this maniacal owner who we've just owned the team through one of the greatest stretches of basketball ever, and he's calling me 15, 16, 17, 18 times in a day. What's it going to be like working for this man when we have an exorbitant payroll, an aging roster, and we're struggling to even just avoid the draft lottery and missing the playoffs? It is going to be hell on earth. I'm going to leave now. To me, when I heard that press conference and I heard Joe say, "We will win," it's like, Joe, you won't win, okay? Because Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green have gotten old, and you can't find another Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Klay Thompson, or at least I'm betting that you can't. If you can, good luck to you. But that statement of "we will win," I think is the reason he's leaving.
Oh, he said today, came out and said, CBA rules or not, we will win with all, it's like they're putting these
it's high expectations.
Basically it's going to be very tough for teams like the Warriors and Clippers and Phoenix, teams with a couple of stars that have high payroll. They're not going to be able to, they're strapping their hands. I mean, they're not going to be able to do things. And Bob saw that. And like you said, Larry, the fact that he called that many times and was that demanding.
And he's that hands-on too. He's he's the true hands-on owner.
Well, sure. And
it all
Bob
looks easy.
And Bob is
it does. It really from afar. Heck, I told Ned, it reminds me of the conversations I'd have with you in the press box. I'd be like, "Hey, I'd trade this guy and I'd trade that guy and I'd do this." And I remember you saying to me, "Hey, Larry, love you, but this is not about a glance. This is not about a notion. There's a lot that goes into this, and you may think that this is the right move, and you wouldn't insult me and be like, 'You're an idiot.' But at the same time, you would remind me of exactly how laborious the whole process really is. And don't, just because you made a right guess or a right thought on a player here or there, doesn't mean, as you're doing it for fake and you got a couple right, as Brian used to say many times, you guys are doing it hypothetically. We're doing it for real.
In real time.
I've seen guys at the racetrack who are like, I can pick winners, but then all of a sudden it's just on a piece of paper. Wait until there's real money going out, and suddenly your percentage of wins is not quite what it needs to be. So there's a big difference between theoretically doing it and doing it. And it's just sometimes I think these owners forget that.
Think it's easy. Have never had to make a living doing it.
And
because it is so hard.
Yeah.
And you know what? And it just in general here, and I don't know the ownership that you're talking about. I've never been in the same room with them.
Well, you do know Peter Goober. He's one of the owners.
Peter, but Peter, you don't see
Peter's got hands off. No.
You know, there's two things that I was always aware of that I had to kind of watch out for, so to speak. One is the new owner, new to the sport as far as ownership goes. I was asked a couple times, so what would you tell a new owner when they come in? And I would say, the best thing you could do, in all due respect, is sit and watch for a year and not get involved. Ask questions. You're smart, obviously. You've made a fortune on the outside, but sit, listen, and learn. And you rarely ever see anybody do that. Look at the Mets right now. Steve Cohen came in and was going to spent his way to $500 million. They may figure it out. Atlanta's better than they are right now.
Right.
They're as good as Florida right now. So you got to be careful with that, because people think they know sports until they have to live and die with it every day and make a living on the decisions that they make that are going to be your success or your lack of success is going to be somebody else's effort, not yours. If Sabes and I were just judged on effort, we would have never not won a World Series. That's not how it goes. Mm-hmm. And the second thing about the ownerships is when they see success, sometimes they think anybody can do this. Good luck.
Right.
Because not anybody can do it.
Totally true. And managing expectations. I was watching the other night, Moneyball was on. And I don't know why I like that movie. I really do like that movie. And when I see it on, I watch it. And there's a scene where Billy Bean's sitting there talking to the owner. And the owner's like, yeah, you're going to lose Giambi and Damon and Isringhausen and all these guys. But that's okay. You'll get back with your guys and you'll put it all together. And you guys will be just fine. And Billy goes, you know what? We're not going to be fine. Mm-hmm. We're actually, we're losing this guy and we're losing that guy. And that's a big part of it too, right, Ned, is creating, there's the one thing that translates, and it's sales. And at some point when you're doing sales, we all have done sales, whether you're actually selling or just maybe you're selling a point to a group of people, but you in good salespeople under promise
over
deliver and not the opposite. They don't over promise and under deliver. Managing the expectations of the owner is kind of one of the jobs of the general manager. Did you ever feel in any of your years, Ned, like, hey, you know what? We need to do a better job. Their expectations of us are greater than we're going to be able to produce. So we're either going to be failures in their eyes, or we're going to have to back them off and manage their expectations and get their expectations back to a realistic level, or this thing's going to spiral out of control. How do you do that as a general manager? Take a guy who's paying your salary and try to manage his expectations without insulting him, right? You can't insult him.
In the interviews, I asked them what their expectations were. When they interviewed me, I interviewed them too. Mm-hmm. And I said, so what are your expectations? Both of me and of your team. What are your expectations? Because that leads to another question. After they explain their expectations of the team, most of them will say, and what do you think? And that's when you say, well, like Billy Bean said, we're not going to be able to replace these guys. And you got to be honest with people and lay out expectations. You have to manage expectations all the time. But I asked it in San Francisco and I asked it in LA. What are your expectations for this team? And because that's, I'll let you, this is what I do. I'm going to go back a couple minutes here to something that I wanted to say about Bob Meyer and his job and Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr, this is one of the greatest combinations I think in sport. And I don't live.
You ever met Kerr at all?
I watch it from a distance, but I think that they're pretty good at what they do. Actually, very good at what they do. But even Steve Kerr, I think, in the middle of the summer, he's thinking about the team once in a while, in communication with Bob Meyer once in a while, maybe a lot. But nobody thinks about the team like the GM does. It is nonstop. It is Christmas Eve, and you're thinking about it. You're trying to figure it out. That's why when we first started talking about this, I mentioned, so who does the GM deal with? And he deals with everybody. And you never stop thinking about it. Now, is an owner prepared to do that and have the owner's decisions judged on a daily basis? I don't know many that do, because it's not a part-time gig. It's not a sometime gig. It's not a 6-day-a-week gig. It's not a 50-week-a-year gig. It's every day. From the day that Bob Myers said, yeah, and I've never talked to him about it, from the day he said, yes, I'm the general manager, until the other day, there was not one day he hasn't thought about the Golden State Warriors. Not one day, I would bet, has gone by without him thinking about what lies ahead and what he needs to do to fix it. Is that made for everybody? No. This ain't the fantasy league. And this ain't sitting in the first row or up in the owner's suite and dealing with it on a sometime basis. It's not that. It's not that.
You sleep. Yeah, you lay. I imagine you think about it as you're laying on your pillow and like, what can I do?
I had good teams in LA. We had good teams in San Francisco. I think I was under 500 maybe once or twice in my last 25 years. Not easy to do. So we always had good teams. Players competed, good managers, good owner, the whole thing. But if I got up in the middle of the night, I was up the rest of the night. And we may have won 10 games in a row. If I get up at 3 or 4 in the morning.
You should get in our fantasy league because football this year, because I bug Larry at 1, 2 in the morning for trades.
My wife thought I was cheating on her. Seriously. Ned, I'm not even joking. It's like 1:45 in the morning. All of a sudden my bzz, bzz, and she's, who is that? And I go, I don't know. I'm not sure. I look over, and it's like, hey, I've got these 3 wide receivers. Will you take them for these 2 running backs and a tight end? And I'm like, it's Dan Coach Amelia with a fantasy trade. No, it isn't. It's 1:00 in the morning. Let me see that. I'm like, here, hand her the phone. There's 3 wide receivers and a running back for 2 running backs and a tight end. She's like, what is wrong with him?
Well, then I amend my statement. Bob Meyer and Danny don't sleep all year.
I mean, unbelievable. And Dan never played fantasy. That's the other one. There was another line that I've got to throw at you, and to me, it's really interesting. Bob Myers said, he's talking about Steve Kerr, and he's like, you know what? I love Steve, and he's been great, and Steve's a great coach, and he's been here for a long time. He's going to be here for a long time. And he makes a comment, and it was the truest damn thing, and all of us know it's the truth. And yet we don't really talk about it very much. In sports, pro sports in America, the head coach general manager relationship in whatever sport John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan with the Niners. Brian and you and Dusty, let's say, with the Giants, or you and Joe Torre with the Dodgers. Myers and Kerr with the Warriors. It is the most important relationship in the entire organization.
Mm-hmm.
And Bob said it. It's doomed for failure because it's always, well, you didn't get me enough players. Well, no, I got you enough players. You didn't do enough with it. And he commented on how that relationship is doomed for failure. And there was a point this year where Bob Myers was being pressed hard by the media. Why don't you add a big man at the trade deadline? Why don't you add a big man at the buyout market? And at one point, he kind of cracked. And he said, you know what? I could get the greatest big man in the world, but if the coaching staff doesn't play him, then that's not going to do us any good. And that kind of revealed maybe a little bit of a disconnect between the front office and the coach, or maybe a difference in philosophy. Bob's too classy. Steve's too classy. They're both too solid of people to let it ruin their relationship. But I think it's fair to ask if there was a little bit of a fracture there. And if you have a fracture in your core relationship and there's a fracture of the trust, maybe that was enough for Bob to say, maybe it's time for me to just move on. But Ned, I want you to talk about that, because that's an unbelievable part of pro sports. It's like, did I get you enough talent and you didn't do enough with it? Or did I not do my job and didn't get you the right players, and that's why we lost? And somehow that gets decided on some level by an owner, by the fans, by the media, but you know what I mean? It's like the truth behind the scenario. Did the Giants not win because Ned and Brian didn't give Dusty enough, or did Dusty blow it with Ned and Brian's players? And you know what I mean? And this is, and I just use that as an example, but you know what I'm saying? It's doomed for failure. Bob's totally right. Is there any way around that? Is there any way to make that so, like, can you have that conversation with your manager or your coach and just be like, hey, look, either, you know the way this is going to go. I know the way this is going to go. Either I didn't get you enough or you didn't do enough with what we got you. Can you have that conversation in the offseason and lay it out on the table and kind of clear the air so you don't get to that uncomfortable moment, or is it inevitable?
It's almost inevitable, unless you're probably Bill Belichick and you're going to do both gigs.
Right. Bill Walsh back in the day.
We don't know how that's going to turn out. It is the most important relationship in the organization. Again, going back to what I said a while ago, players know. And players know if those two people are getting along, or if there's a difference of opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a crack in it, it's you can bandage it, but you're never going to heal it. And I think in time that happens. And I think one of the great challenges for the next leader of Golden State on the basketball side is that relationship. Because even though it's probably doomed at the end in some way, you can't dismiss the success these two people had together. So there was a lot of compromise on both sides of it. And, it's a very, very delicate maneuver all the time. I would always give the manager to say on a 24th, 25th player at the end of camp. I didn't want to fight that fight because the manager had to have some say in it. But if the manager called me on players and wanted this player or that player, and I knew something the manager didn't know, that player wasn't coming here. Not here, but LA, And then, I have one scenario where every 6 weeks, the manager asked about getting this player who was on another team. And I finally had to say, I don't want to hear about this anymore. You haven't seen this player for 5 years. Okay. I don't want to hear about it anymore. If I have an inclination to get this player, I'll let you know. But, you can't do it every day. And managers and coaches look at the sport differently than the GM. The manager or the head coach, by and large, is looking at today. This game today. And the GM or the president looks at this game today, a week from now, a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, on and on and on. The GM sits at 30,000 feet trying to figure it all out and lay it out. To your first point of the evening, Larry, of getting players in their prime at the same time. And the manager or the head coach basically is, hey, how are we going to win today? I got enough to win today. So you have a little bit of a conflict there.
Ned, do you, as a GM, do you want your manager guaranteeing a world championship
Never.
And if he
Dave
did, like
Roberts
Roberts did, would you say something about it or no?
As who did?
Dave Roberts said that last year.
Roberts guaranteed the World Series last year. Remember that?
Yeah, I love Dave. I don't know that I like.
I thought that was the kiss of death when he said that, because it's I thought, oh my goodness, you're putting entire pressure on not only yourself but the team is gonna. It's either win the World Series. I mean, you could think that and probably say that to your players, but you don't voice that publicly.
No, and it's the same. It's kind of the same thing of a GM saying, "Well, we're going to go and get the best free agent hitter in the offseason." Nobody knows that,
right?
Nobody knows.
Ned, your point is excellent about looking at players. Not just today, but tomorrow, 5 years down the road. And it got me thinking about basketball, because the most successful teams in the past and even now are the organizations that draft, develop their own players, and have them ascend within their organization. It's not by mistake that the Warriors, by and large, got it done with players that they drafted.
Yes.
The Lakers, the Boston Celtics, all of these organizations, regardless of the sport, the 49ers, when they were really good, they wasn't going out getting free agents. There wasn't a lot of free agency back then anyway. They might get a player to plug a position, but it's the organizations that build from within, generally speaking, have success.
Yeah, the Giants, 2014 title, the Giants, you had Belt, Panic, Crawford, and Pablo in the infield and Buster behind the plate, and you had the three pitchers. You had Lincecum, Kane, and Mad Bum. It was all homegrown. Same with the Dodgers in the 70s. I remember their infield. It was, Say at third, Bill Russell at short, Davey Lopes, and Steve Garvey. And then they had their pitching, and they had Steve Yeager and Joe Ferguson behind the plate. All those guys came up, and they're
even a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
Seager, Bellinger, Peterson,
right,
Kershaw, Jansen, Will Smith, Walker Buehler.
Right.
See, if you do it right as an organization, if you draft well and you develop well, when a player gets drafted by the Warriors and they show up at camp, they see right away where the bar's at.
Mm-hmm.
What do they have to do? What do Warriors do? What do Giants do? What do Dodgers do? And if you're coming from another place, you got to figure that all out. And so, most of my free agent mistakes, and we've all got them, were because of a handful of reasons, but including that the player didn't come from an organization that valued work ethic, valued camaraderie, valued execution, all these things. And, one of my very first free agent I signed Rafael Furcal from Atlanta. And he played like crazy. It was great for us. But I also knew he came from Bobby Cox and John Sherholtz. So he knew how to play. Okay, he's on one of the great organizations in baseball, over a 14, 15-year period. He knew how to play. So, you can do that with a couple of guys here and there, but if your team the core of your group are all from some other organization at some point in time, good luck.
AJ Pierzynski. You didn't know he came from a different culture. It wasn't your guy's culture, and he didn't fit, and it stood out like a sore thumb. I think the 49ers have mastered free agency in the NFL, and I'll tell you why. Because one, if you bring in a free agent, a guy that nobody knows, or from another team, and you pay him more than the guys who are in the room, suddenly there's a problem.
You got it.
And what the Niners have done is they've done one subtle thing in free agency the last few years. They no longer go after a bunch of free agents. They don't. They go after, there's an equation now where you get compensatory picks. If you lose 4 free agents, but you sign 3, you get a compensatory pick. If your equation basically is negative, you get compensatory picks. They allow 5 guys to walk, and they only sign 1 free agent. But their free agents the last 2 years, 2 years ago was Charvarius Ward. Well, they went and signed him from Kansas City, but he was their best defensive back. So it worked. This year, they signed Javon Hargrave away from the Eagles, and it's going to work out. He got paid a boatload of cash, but he's their best defensive tackle. So nobody in the room can go, hey, man, I should know these guys are on a higher level. And so it's okay to pay a guy more when he's clearly on a higher level. But when you got guys who are, I don't know, 5 people think this guy's better, 4 people think that guy's better. But, and you pay one, and he's not the incumbent, and the whole room is sitting there going, I've been blood, sweat, and tears. I played the last 3 weeks of the season with a dislocated elbow. I taped up a blah, blah, and this is the thanks I get. I got lowballed in my offer, and they're going out in the free agent market and signing this guy from the Falcons and bringing him in, giving him 2.5 times my salary. Man, that's disrespect. And you make this kind of move 2, 3, 4, 5 times over a course of a typical GM run, let's say 3 to 4 or 5 years, you got a lot of resentment in the room. And you got a lot of guys going, you don't respect the guys in the room as much as the guys who we compete against on the other side. And it ruins your culture and it ruins your vibe. And Lynch understands this as a former player. Shanahan gets this, and they've changed their thinking. They go for free agents. It's one of the 3 or 4 ways to get better in the NFL, but they don't go sign 9 guys. They'll fill in with rookies and guys in-house and that kind of thing and promote from within. They'll go get 1 guy, but that guy's the top of a top tier guy that nobody can sit there and go, I'm Javon Hargrave. No, you're not. I'm Mooney Ward. No, you're not. And so I think they've mastered it. And the result is they're adding premier players to their roster. They have better vibes. They don't have guys looking around. They're rewarding by extending their own guys from within more times than not because they're not signing free agents from the outside world. They put more of an emphasis on player development and the draft and rookies coming into their room. And to me, it makes all the difference in the world as far as chemistry. In a sport like football, chemistry matters a lot. So to me, I think they've mastered kind of how to do free agency in 2023 at a really high level and benefit both with the compensatory picks and, the impact on your room. Give me your thought.
Would you say the Warriors have done the same?
The Warriors, I would say, have drafted and developed their core, and they're just trying to supplement their core. But I think the Warriors kind of blew it this year, to be honest, Ned, because the Warriors, if you listen to any of the Warrior media this year, when Steph, Draymond, Clay, when these guys were talking, when Kerr was talking, I did 3 interviews with him this year. When Bob Myers was talking, they were talking about the 2 timelines and the old guys versus the young guys. Good teams don't differentiate between the old guys and the young guys. All teams have old guys and young guys, but you don't sit there and go, well, the old guys are doing their part, but the young guys aren't holding their. So the Warriors had a vibe this year of 2 teams. And Frank, heck, you experienced it. You could probably speak to it too, Frank. this constant dialogue about us versus them when we're talking about one team, I don't think is a healthy culture. And I think they learned a painful lesson this year. I don't think they were necessarily together as much as past Warrior teams have been together, because they did talk about, and they allowed their veteran players to say, well, I'm not the problem, and Clay's not the problem, and Steph's not the problem. The problem is James Wiseman, and the problem is, Jonathan Kuminga. The problem is Moses Moody. These young guys who don't have the rings, they're the problem. And that 2-timeline approach can work, but we all have to be kind of pulling on the rope on the same direction. And I felt there was a little bit of a us versus them, but we're talking about one team. I don't know that they mastered that this year. Frank, you've been around this. We've been talking about this all year. Give us your perspective.
No, I think that you're definitely on to something. And, just because you're a great basketball player and you get older, it doesn't mean that you are on top of everything. The reality is the society in the minds of young people, it changes every 5 years. I mean, the fundamentals of how you do things don't change, but the perspective of how young people look at the world changes every 5 years. And if you're an older player, an older person, and you're not aware of that, you are taking your mentality and assuming that this young group of players or people understand or they agree with you. And the world is changing, and if you don't acknowledge that, and you're absolutely right, the communication style and the assumptions that were made with these young players of the Warriors, it hurt their development and it hurt the overall team, because these young players have their own ideals about how they function, what their goals are, what the organization's goals are. And if you're not aware of all of these things, you have chaos. And the Warriors had chaos this year, and it was painful to watch. And we talked about it for the past 6 or 7 months. So you're right there.
Wow.
I'd like to point out something too, Larry, what you were talking about with the Niners and the way they maybe spend money on one guy and they don't have that upsetting because there's 4 or 5 different guys who are getting paid different things. That also goes for organizations. And I'm just going to point this out because I've been a season ticket holder for the Giants. And last year, I really took it on the chin financially because I live in Arizona and I didn't go to a lot of games, and I put them up for sale, and they weren't doing that well on the field, and so consequently, fans didn't show up, and a lot of people wouldn't buy tickets, and I had to eat a lot of tickets that I couldn't sell, even dropping them down to $10 a piece. Now this year, I had 2 seats to renew at $13,000 for 2 tickets. At $6,500 a seat, that's at average of $80 a ticket. I didn't renew because of the way things went last year. And thank goodness I didn't renew, because the Giants have come out with promotions selling tickets for $5.01 for the whole summer if you bought them, a few weeks ago. And now they're doing new promotions where it's 2 for 1. They're undercutting the financial support, the people who pay their, the bread and butter, the fans that, allow you to put your budget together for, what your payroll is going to be, all that. And now season ticket holders are getting left holding their seats because I could, instead of paying $80, I can go up and walk up and buy a ticket for $5, and sit where I pretty much want. So what you're going to do is next year, you're going to alienate the rest of your base because they're going to go, well, wait a minute, I'm losing money. So I think the Giants, and I'm just speaking, and hopefully the Giants are listening, take care of your season ticket holders. It doesn't cost you much. You bought parking spaces. Give your season ticket holders free parking. Give them $20 in concessions for each game. Cost you $1 for a hot dog and you charge 10. A beer. What is a beer? 10, $12. Cost them nothing. It's draft beer. give them some incentive for their faithfulness, and then maybe they'll want to re-up next year. Because if you keep dropping and losing season ticket holders, that's going to have a direct impact on what you can do in the off season. So that's my take to the Giants.
There you go. Good for you, Danny. A couple of super chats. I got one more for Ned, and then we're going to wrap this up. We're trying to finish up here at 2 hours. We're about 5 minutes away from 2 hours. Mark Hope says, Dan, why would the Giants help your investment? Interesting comment there. We've got this one from Mark Hope. He says, Frank, what's the status of big men in the NBA? Well, it doesn't seem like teams want the bigs that much. And then we have a one from Mark as well. Says, thanks, Ned. Your lessons on discipline are great. GR with the 8. Great. Frank, go ahead, Frank. What is your read on where the NBA is as far as big men? I mean, it's like I saw a rumor the other day that maybe Jordan Poole would get dealt to the Suns for DeAndre Ayton. And there used to be a rule that you would never, ever, ever trade a small man for a big man, or you would never trade a big man for a small man. But in this case, the league's changed, and now big men are not valued as much. They're not needed as much, or at least that's the belief. I don't know if that's the truth. What's your perspective on it, Frank?
I think that coaches don't want to get fired. There's never been more pressure on NBA coaches, so they adapt to the style that they think, the league is prone to play at this point. And in this era of basketball, listen, the Golden State Warriors have done a lot to shape the NBA over the past decade, and everybody wants to play that style of basketball at every level. And as a result, the teaching is not happening. When I watch basketball, particularly big guys, I'm looking for a few simple things. Do you box out? A lot of guys don't box out. Do you know how to box out? Your arm should be up here if you're going to box out. Do you know how to shoot the most effective, simplest shot in basketball? The jump hook. Guys don't even know how to shoot a jump hook. Do you use the glass? Do you know how to drop step? These are fundamental things that I don't see happening. And, for a big guy like myself, somebody asked how tall I'm 6'7", about 300 pounds. All right.
I said 260.
No, I'm about 300.
You're coming down the lane. I'm not taking a charge at 61 years of age, Frank.
I would pay to see Frank truck your ass.
But here's the point. Most big men coaches, those are dream jobs, right? They usually go to a veteran, maybe not somebody who, somebody might have been a good player, but can they teach, and are they allowed to really teach? I mean, you look at Jokic. Jokic didn't get there by himself. He did not. And I know allegedly the Warriors coach helped develop the guy. I'm sure he did.
Right.
But that's skill. Those are hours in the gym. That's feel. That's talent. You don't see that happening. So I'm disappointed because a good player is a good player. I don't care what size they are. And I don't see the development among big guys in the NBA. I'm excited that Monty Williams is going to Detroit because with that contract, he now has the time to invest in every player, regardless of what position they play. And you should see a level of improvement within all of their players that we haven't seen before.
This has been, I think, maybe the best show we've ever had. I really think this has been an incredible show.
It's been good.
I've enjoyed it immensely, but I got one just titanic blow here to finish this out. We're talking about the Warriors. That's one of the big topics on the show tonight. There was a dramatic moment in this Warriors season. And Ned, I know you're down in Southern Cal, and I don't know how much of this filtered down or if this was a local story. But Draymond Green dropped Jordan Poole. Punched him right in the face early in the year. And it probably had an impact on the season. And I don't know to what degree. I really don't. We saw it because the video got leaked. which is even worse. Made everybody really paranoid over there. Ned, I don't know if you were there when Barry Bonds and Danny Darwin fought, but supposedly Danny Darwin, who's a pretty tough guy, and basically him and Barry Bonds fought. Boys will be boys, that whole thing. But a brawl within your clubhouse, have you encountered it? How do you deal with it? Do you deal with it? Do you stay out of it? If it gets leaked publicly, do you have to address it? It became a soap opera. Every single time they didn't win a few games, they lost a few games. Maybe the Draymond punch of Poole had something to do with it. Do they like each other? Do they not like each other? What side are the Warriors management? Are they on Green's side because he's won rings there? Are they on Poole's side because they gave him a big contract extension? What did it do to their chemistry? So on and so forth. It obviously was had a profound impact, but to what degree and what impact, we don't know. Have you ever experienced that? And what's your feelings on it as far as if your second baseman punches out your first baseman? I mean, there's one of the most high profile, one of my favorite shows on right now is the Civil War. I think it's called the Uncivil War between the Dodgers and the Yankees from 76. Sabes probably knows all about this. The Yankees in the late 70s and all their battles from within, and then the Dodgers, Sutton and Garvey supposedly brawled in the Dodger clubhouse in the late 70s. And it was a huge moment for both of these real dynasties at the time. Didn't bother them. I talked the late Vida Blue, God rest his soul. Love Vida. One of my favorite friends. Played a lot of golf with Vida. And man, Vida I'd be like, we'd be on a hole. I'd be like, Vida, tell me that story about game one of the 74 series. He's like, Holtzman and Blue Moon Odom are throwing blows and we're about ready to go out for the anthem. I mean, they're brawling before the Dodgers A's took the field for the World Series. The A's were brawling with each other and they went out and they beat the Dodgers. I'm just kind of wondering, does two teammates fighting in the midst of a season? We saw Dibble and Piniella fight in 90 in the Reds clubhouse.
Last night, Jet and Barry in the dugout in San Diego.
Well, Kent and Barry. The 90 Reds, let me think. Yeah, they won the World Series, with Dibble and Piniella, the manager and the closer, or the setup man and the manager brawling in the dugout or in the clubhouse. Where are you on these brawls? Did you ever witness them? Did you ever have to, you and Brian, you and Tori, did you guys ever have to deal with that? How did you deal with it? Do you ignore it? Do you have a meeting? What do you think? I mean, it was the biggest drama that surrounded this Warrior season. We can't have a Warrior discussion without discussing it and getting your perspective.
I think there's close to one a year, if not more. I would think that in my history, is probably 80% of them actually helped because of who was involved and why they were involved. And if it's if you have a close-knit team, you're gonna have situations that happen. The Barry Danny thing was a ball that Danny didn't think Barry went after, and he called him on it. I had stuff in LA where different things like that went on, and if the team is prepared, sometimes it does nothing but kind of fine tune the efforts. People got to understand it. People got to get along. If it's out of respect, if not, I shouldn't say out of respect. If it's not rooted in disrespect, I don't think it hurts. I think it can kind of sharpen everybody's edge a little bit. If there's disrespect in it, or old versus new, or things like that, yeah, then you're gonna have an upside down situation. I had one in New York with LA where one of our young players, good player, had enough of a veteran and just almost came to blows in the clubhouse. And we went to the LCS.
Did you meet with him? Did anybody meet with him? Did manager meet with him?
The manager to make sure that it wasn't out of disrespect and that it was frustration or trying to hold people accountable and get people to play to a stronger level. Sometimes that happens. And I think it depends. I think every situation is potentially different. And it depends on the background that led to it. I had no problem with Danny and Barry Bonds doing what they did. Or
were
Jeff.
you there for that? Did you see
Well,
did you see the Darwin?
With the club. I wasn't down the runway between innings, but I was with the club, I mean, I was rarely not with the club. And so you saw it all the time and you knew it. And it wasn't my job to referee it. It was the manager's job. If the manager had to mediate it, then it was the manager's responsibility to mediate it. And I can't recall what happened in those situations, but I think it made the collective group actually better. As I think also when Jeff won the MVP in 2000, I told Sabes the day that we found out that he was going to be the MVP. I said, this is going to aggravate Barry so much that his adversary won the MVP and broke his streak at the same time, I think, or it may have been broken ahead of that. This is just going to sharpen him and make him even better. And if you look at the history of Barry with the Giants, tough to say that the 01-02 seasons weren't maybe his equal or greater than his best.
Frank, Danny, you guys got a thought on this as well you want to share? Ned, I didn't think you were going to say that. I really didn't think you were going to look at this as a positive. And I know you're not saying it's always a positive. I know you're saying it can be a positive. It can be a positive.
It depends what it's rooted in. It depends what causes it to begin with.
Right.
I think Ned made a great point about, is it about disrespect or is it about respect? I've seen some altercations on some teams that I've been on, but size makes a difference. Okay, it makes a big difference. If Draymond had went at Kevon Looney and he can defend himself, that's different. But Poole, to me, was not even close to being on Draymond's level. And Draymond is a boxer. You can tell he's been in the gym. He threw a punch that could have ended Poole's life. I mean, literally, if he had to hit him in the temple, it was a glazing shot. He knows how to throw a punch. That's different because that's like, you know what? I don't care about what the end result is. I don't care. And my actions are illustrating that. Now, if you got two guys who are just kind of like talking stuff to each other and it's like, yo, man, shut up, or we're going to go. Well, I'm not going to shut up. Then let's go. That's different. I mean, my nature, I grew up watching violence, so I'm nonviolent. And I don't know how to play fight. You know what I'm saying? So I try to avoid all type of conflict because big guys also can hurt people. I'm a big guy. You know what I'm saying? It's not like I'm 175 pounds. If I punch somebody, if somebody punches me, bad things will happen. You know what I'm saying? So I think that mentality of knowing the situation, like you, Larry, you cover the 49ers all the time. You see those big guys and some of those small guys too. In that environment, bad things can happen. So I try to avoid conflict. But hey, man, sometimes guys fight. Sometimes girls fight. And if it's about respect, if you can throw a punch and you're willing to take one, then, clean yourself up. Apologize and let's go. But that Draymond Jordan Poole thing, that was not about respect, in my opinion. So,
what do you think it was, Frank? Was it about money?
No, I think it's about. I'm not at practice, but I was coached not to say anything. You know Draymond. You know where he comes from. You know his mentality, right? If you're going to talk to Draymond, then you got to understand that he's going to receive it in a certain way. If you get that and you still want to engage in that level, then that's fine. I would expect Draymond to say, listen, let me Musa and let me go in the opposite direction because this could get real ugly. But I think that you are accountable for your words. All right? I don't care what size you are. You are accountable for your words in that situation, but professionalism has to supersede all of that stuff. So I probably think within the Warriors organization, there were some signs that it could come to this, and they didn't handle it. All right? That's what I think. But you are responsible for your words. All right? If you don't say anything or somebody comes in your space, that's a whole nother thing. But if you are saying things that you know is going to upset somebody, like me, you honestly think that I'm going to say, yo, Shaq, let me help you with your 49% free throw percentage. You know what I'm saying? I mean, when he's pissed off.
Right.
I mean, come on. He might say, you said I'm going to slap you. And if he slaps me, you know what? I mean, okay. All right. I mean, what am I going to do? I'm going to deal with it, or will I remember the laugh that the entire team was enjoying? So, and again, that's not necessarily disrespectful. So those things happen on teams. I honestly don't think Draymond and Jordan Poole like each other. I don't know. I'm not at practice. I don't believe it. So I think you got to watch yourself in that situation, man.
Danny, give us a perspective of a smaller man. I'm just joking. I'm joking. No, Danny, give us your perspective, Danny, because I know you've been around the block, and you're at Del Boca Vista, and there's probably not a lot of fighting there. But
I'm out of Del Boca Vista now. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. You're out because for fighting.
That's right.
Right. You were kicked out for fighting. No, but give us your perspective, Danny, before we wrap this here.
You talking about just on general on fighting and stuff?
Well, I mean, you saw the Warriors from afar. We're all kind of guessing on this one because we really don't know. I put up the chat that, we had a guy here say, hey, it's one of the prevailing thoughts. And here it is here. Nick J says, apparently Poole was disrespecting Steve Kerr. Draymond had enough and clocked him. True or not, the punch was the first part of the downfall of this dynasty. So he's throwing his opinion in there. And I've heard that concept thrown out. Nobody obviously has verified it. And I have no sources that, that tell me one way or another, but just give me your perspective on what you think the punch did to the team this year.
Well, I think there's two things here. One, I think there's a difference possibly between baseball, football fights and basketball. Basketball is a really small, tight-knit team. Football, you got defense, you got offense. Baseball, you got
coaches love fighting in the NFL. People will never admit it, but when two teams in training camp fight, the coaches go back to their room and are like, we're ready. We're ready.
Yeah, I mean, I was involved in, basketball. Generally, it's 12 guys, 15 guys in the NBA. And in the Warriors situation this year, there really was two timelines. You had like 7 guys that were 22 or younger. And then you got these older guys that are all 30 plus. And I think what happened when it happened, I'm imagining as some of these young guys that are 19, 20 years old, idolizing the Warriors dynasty when they're in their teens, and they come up and they watch Draymond just clock a guy. I would think it kind of almost like, hey, can we trust this guy? Is this guy, this is odd, because like Frank said, it wasn't just a fight. It was it was a cheap shot. It was a sucker punch. And so I think in that situation, it brought kind of a lot of disarray. I think of a real fight, man-to-man type fight, like Ned said. I think it can bring teams together, because generally when two guys have a fight, I mean, I've been in fights as a younger kid and then all of a sudden you become friends with the guy. It's like you fought, you got it over because you were both ready to go. But when you get sucker punched, that doesn't leave somebody, So I think it had a real fracture on the team. And then the other thing that really strikes me on this is, how did that leak? Who leaked that? How did that get out of the room when they kept Andrew Wiggins being gone for 2 months, like so tight-lipped that we probably still don't really know the truth behind,
No, I think that was the part that bothered people the most, was the fact that it was leaked out. Ned, we'll finish here, but you've worked now in the NHL, and I'll tell you the most amazing thing to me about the NHL. And this is one thing: when you're truly tough, you don't have to front like you're tough. And the hockey players are truly tough, and they don't. So they don't make a lot of verbal threats. But it amazes me how these guys can play virtually the same schedule as the NBA, 80 games. They're playing for months, and these guys are out there fighting it out every night. Every night. They're going to drop the gloves, and it's on. And hockey players can fight. I mean, these guys are fighting on skates, on ice. It's amazing. And then they go down, they break it up. But I always just I just could never get myself to understand, because I grew up in California not playing hockey, the culture of hockey where fighting is not just accepted, it's like expected. And you can't say, these guys all have the same agent and no, everybody loves everybody. What? Everybody loves everybody. There's guys fighting it out every night in the NHL, and it probably has changed. They used to have goons and Ty Domi and different guys. Guys who he's on our team because he can fight.
Who was that guy with the Flyers? Dave Clark, or who was it? Not
Dave Schultz.
Who was it?
Dave Schultz.
That's right, Dave Schultz.
There was Probert.
He was great in the 70s.
It wasn't the guy who played on the Rangers in '94. Messier could fight. There's all kinds of, But explain to me the culture of hockey. Why can these guys? I mean, explain it to me. How are these guys having this much anger where they fight every night?
Well, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit.
Okay, go ahead.
They don't fight every night. They play hard every night. And there's a lot of contact every night. But there's not a fight every night.
How often would you say? How often is there fights? I've been at 3 hockey games in the last 3 years. There was a fight at 2 of them.
Well, it's a little less than that over.
Okay, so they fight a lot, but it's not every night.
I'd say 10 to 15 times over a course of a season per team. Mm-hmm. But it depends on the composition of the team too. But it's almost a code. You stand up for your teammate. And especially if you're a talented, smaller player that somebody's taking it to physically, cheap shot, whatever, somebody's going to answer to that. And it's really a code almost to it. It's less and less, but it's still part of the dynamic of how you build a team, is with the toughness and the grit and the physicality that your team can have. I've loved the sport as long as I've loved baseball. I can remember we were struggling in LA, and we were playing the Diamondbacks, and Greinke was pitching, and he hit a guy, and he got hit, and then later on in the game he got brushed back again. Ian Kennedy, I think it was Ian Kennedy, threw it up and in near his head, and we had this massive brawl. And I can't tell you I didn't like it. I kind of liked that we stood up for each other. And I think we won 43 of the next 50 after that. and it unified the group. And that's what you'll see in hockey. You know, the history of the sport is filled with different physical altercations. The New York Islanders would get beat by the Boston Bruins year in and year out. And the legend would have it, a player named Clark Gillies, who just passed away in the last couple of years, fought their tough guy in Boston, Terry O'Reilly. And for the first time, an Islander won the fight. And the Islanders won the next 4 cups.
Yeah. Early
You know,
70s,
so
yeah.
it's a little bit of that to it. If you're not tough in that sport, if you don't have grit to your game, and not everybody has it. Some of the greatest players don't really need it.
Gretzky had McSorley. He didn't have grit.
Yeah, that you have somebody that's gonna kind of look out for you a little bit. But it's a huge component of the game. You know, I mean, I've watched all these playoffs, and you know, I've seen cheap shots. I've seen guys almost, you know, in the heat of the moment. If it wasn't the heat of the moment, it would be intent to injure. And they shake hands at the end. Man. Because they understand this is what we do. This is the physicality of it. But it's less and less. And you know, your comment about the goon, quote goon, is almost out of the game now. You need to bring something besides your toughness. There's still a few players that can set the tone. But at this time of year, it's tough to win if you are not tough, and if you don't play what they would call a heavy game. You know, one of the best teams in the league just got boxed in the second round, and you know, in my opinion, they struggled to compete at this time of year, despite an abundance of raw skill and the ability to execute and do the other facets of the game. I have one other comment for you.
Yeah,
and it's a little bit of folklore, but it may also be true. There was a small college that was known for developing a baseball player now and then. And think about this dynamic. This would never happen today. But the last position on that team at the end of their training camp was decided by a fist fight.
Whoa.
That the coach took, if it was a 25-man roster, took player number 25 and 26, if they were even in talent and everything else, and he would see who the tougher one was in front of everyone.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know if that's folklore or whatever, but that was a story that made the rounds for a few years.
I was watching Miracle, the Disney breakdown of the with Kurt Russell as the coach.
80. Yeah.
Who was the U.S. hockey coach who died? Who's
Herb Brooks.
Herb Brooks, who was classic.
Yeah.
You know, fight starts at this training camp, and Kurt Russell, Herb Brooks says, let him go. And these guys fight it out, and you know, and then he basically lectured them, and you know, and he somehow, you know, we're supposed to believe that it kind of unified them to some degree, but it's
no doubt.
It you know, it's always interesting. Let's just say that it's always interesting, and it always adds intrigue to any game you're at when you actually feel like these sides hate each other and they want to fight it out. Mark Hope says, Ned, please start a hocky podcast. I need it.
Mark Hope, it's great having you part of the show tonight. I'm not sure I'll be starting a hockey podcast, but anytime I'm up here, you got any hockey conversation you want to have, we'll break into.
Who's going to win the finals, Ned? Who's going to win the Stanley Cup?
Vegas.
Probably Vegas, but Florida's playing with the house's money too.
Yeah.
Doesn't Florida have the ex-Shark?
What?
Doesn't Florida have the ex? Isn't Burns on Florida?
No, Burns is in Carolina.
Oh, Carolina. So he just got eliminated.
Yeah, but Matthew Tkachuk is the best player still playing, and he is a goal scorer. He is a very offensive player who can play 200 feet, and you watch him play, and there is a lot of grit to him. They say, you know, the word is sandpaper and grit. You know, there's some sandpaper to this guy's game. And if you watch it, he's number 19 for Florida. you will see what I'm talking about.
Where do you want to sit at a hockey game, Ned? Where do you sit?
Oh, it depends on what place it is. When I scout Arizona, I sit up in the end zone, smaller rink, college rink.
Have you ever sat up top with the bird's eye view?
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's an incredible spot. I went up there one
yeah.
time at a Sharks game with some scouts. They're like, "Yeah, come, we watch up here," and I'm like, and we're literally looking straight down.
Yes,
that is an unbelievable viewpoint.
Yes. The worst seats, I mean, the worst seats in an arena
on the glass,
at the ones at the glass.
Yeah.
Because you're restricted on a certain part of the game.
Right.
But, you know, I mean, it's cool to sit down there because you see the speed of the game and you'll see the physicality of the game far different than you will from upstairs. But it's tough to get the full view. People love sitting by the glass, but you're only going to see a portion of what you paid for, you know.
Unbelievable live stream. Thank you, gentlemen. Seriously, different perspectives, and we really didn't, you know, we talked a little basketball, we talked a little baseball, we talked a little fighting, a little NHL, but to me, this was probably my favorite live stream that I've done. I've been doing this now since March of 2022, and now we're in June of 2023. But you're three of my favorite people. I love all three of you guys to death, and I just can't thank you enough. This was a phenomenal conversation. You know, I can't thank you enough for your time. Danny, have a great night. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Hey, I just got one quick final thought since we got a lot in the chat here. If people who haven't subscribed to my channel would.
Oh, that's right. Danny's NorCal
awesome.
Sports Network. See, it's there right there at the bottom.
Yeah.
NorCal Sports Network. Sign up for Danny's channel.
Yeah. And some of those negative comments about me and you know, Gretzky had McSorley. Don't mess with me. I got Big Frank Red behind me, all right?
Hey, Frank, I got a question for you.
Yes.
When Larry calls you to do this, does he tell you what he tells me? It'll just be 15 minutes.
Nah, we don't talk about that.
Frank knows the gig. Yeah, I can't shut up, and we just go on and on and on.
No, I'm only kidding.
No.
Yeah.
Now listen, Larry.
Yes.
I actually started in the dungeon.
I know. That was my next thing I was going to get to is that Frank. I've been pushing Frank. Frank forever had this In the Dungeon show on 1140 out of Sacramento. And I used to love this show. It was organic and real. It was oftentimes 3 or 4 people on the show talking. Sometimes it was delved into music, culture. Sometimes it was basketball. Sometimes it was life. And it was just awesome. And I've been trying to encourage him to start this up on YouTube and recreate this show, guys, because it is, I think, one of the best shows I've ever heard. And I was on your Twitter. I was on Twitter and I saw you tweet out that you're starting your channel, Frank. So tell us a little bit about where you're at with your channel, and if we can, let's promote it right here.
Yeah, basically, I finally found the time to do it, and certainly being on your show for the past 6 or 7 months, whenever you give me a call, has been awesome. And yeah, I'm getting into it. And basically what it is at this point is me kind of like just getting my reps in. Like I'll turn the music on and turn on the channel, and I'll talk for like 30 to 45 to 60 minutes by myself, just talking about various topics. Now, I'll do show prep. I do probably 2 hours show prep to allow me to do that. But I think if you're going to really do this, and you know, Larry, I mean, you got to talk. And it's beautiful when you have other people on and you can engage. And this was a fantastic show. But just to kind of like feed the audience and let them know that, oh, this guy can really do this. So I'm talking now about various things, about, like I say, 30 to 45 to 60 minutes. I'm breaking down the particular games. I'm also doing a little NBA draft stuff. So every show I'll take a player or two that might not be on the radar and break that player down. For, you know, for instance, like a Leonard Miller is a guy who I think the Warriors might be taking a look at.
Love him.
Jalen Hood Shapiro out of Indiana. You know, so I'm just starting to get into that. And as I start to build up the listenership, then I'll probably have some guests on. But right now, it's just myself talking. And if people are in the chat, want me to answer questions, then I'll do that. Now, I spell In the Dungeon a little different. It is ENTHA Dungeon, spelled the normal way, and show. And,
just like it is behind you there.
Again.
ENTHA, Dungeon like it's spelled, show.
Yeah.
Just like see right behind Frank's right shoulder there.
Yeah, there you go. Right there.
Okay, there we go.
Frank, just another thought on that. I was talking to our mutual friend, the great Bill Duffy, who's maybe the most successful international basketball agent in the world. I mean, Bill is monster. Great guy. Went to Santa Clara. His offices are here in Walnut Creek. Our kids have grown up together and played together. And I just contacted Bill this week. He put me in contact with his guy. And Bill's got 5 or 6 guys, including Grady Dick from Kansas and the kid from Santa Clara, Podzimski.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to have a couple of those guys doing live streams on the show between now and the draft. And if you're up for it, man, I would love to have you join me during these conversations. And all we're going to talk about is growing up, themselves, their lives, and the lead up to the draft and what their hopes are and what they're hearing from scouts and all that kind of thing. You've seen me do that thing before, but I'd love to have you there joining me for some of those. So if you're up for it, I'll definitely hit you up. And when we'll mark off some dates, I'd love to have you there with me.
Hit me up. I would love to do it. And a quick story about Bill Duffy.
I'm going to subscribe right now, Frank.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
There it is.
Duff almost got me a job playing professional ball in Japan.
Really?
Actually took a meeting with me. Yo, man, Duff is a great guy.
Great guy.
And as you said, just truly one of the real ambassadors of that industry. And think about Duff. It's like Duff, generally speaking, I mean, I can't think of a player that he's represented who his post-playing career didn't turn out great. So, a lot of positive things to say about Bill Duffy. No doubt about that. Good guy. Thank you.
Yeah, let's do this. I don't know if Ned knows this, but Frank is a rapper from New York City. He's collabed with a number of people, and he made this one song. And I'm not gonna run ads here at the end of this show. I'm gonna play this out right here.
Wow.
It's called "Make You Feel."
Yes.
So, Ned, thank you very much for your time. You're the man. Are you a soccer fan? Is that a soccer shirt I'm seeing right there?
It's the Fulham Football Club.
Yeah.
Fulham got advanced to the Premier League this past year and had a great year. I've taken students when I teach abroad to that facility. People are great. They get you to root for them because of their kindness.
Awesome.
And their humility too, going back to that. Right?
Ned, you're a raconteur, man.
That's
Not
awesome.
sure what that is, but I guess that's cool, right?
Yeah.
You brought up the word humility just there, reminded me something I was going to say an hour or so ago when you were talking about nepotism and coming up with humility. I just wanted to share something real quick about Gary Payton the second. His dad was a Hall of Fame player, and last year Gary Payton was about to be cut in training camp, and he just said, "Hey, can I just be the video coordinator? I just want to be part of this team," And to me, that was so refreshing to a guy that just whatever it took to be part of the team. And then he became like a centerpiece to their championship last year. So kudos to GP2.
All right. That does it for us. 2 hours and 34 minutes into this live stream, my favorite live stream. And we're going to play it out right here with Frank's Make You Feel. Great riff, Frank. Incredible. I love it. And once again, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. And hopefully we'll do this again shortly. Frank Red, ladies and gentlemen, with Frank
Sonarelli.
Here we go.
Thank you, gentlemen.
You miss your shot at life. You think there's nothing else for you to do. This ain't a tragedy, son. I know I've seen a few. You You're not responsible for somebody else's thrill. Your integrity's intact and you're still trying to climb the hill. I was a lonely man, I never thought it would come true. But sometimes in life, all you have are your dreams and you. That's when you realize that life ain't standing still. And all you can do is bow your head and accept God's will. But it's funny how it makes you feel. I said it's funny how it makes you feel. I said it's funny how it makes you feel. Life is but a thrill. He had no time for small talk, he didn't mince words, just sum the lyrics to the best song he ever heard. All his hopes and dreams had turned to despair, but what he was facing, there was no way to prepare. This came from a man who thought his life was ending. In his mind, it was serious, there was no pretending. He checked the clock on the wall before he said his goodbyes. He made tears, he has gone, see back into his eyes. He was old in life, there'll be no encore. He raised his hands to the heavens, put his knees on the floor. Don't have to be a genius to know he'd been blessed. He said he'd pay it forward and always do his best. At that moment, what he's been searching for became clear. He was here to serve those who living in fear. With his newfound enlightenment and the wind at his back, he's prepared to live out his life's final act. He was a rich man now, he had purpose in life. And to capture this feeling, you don't pay a price. Before we set up on his own, he made a pledge to get some wins and live his life against the grain to the bitter end. You miss your shot at life, you think there's nothing else for you to do. This ain't a tragedy, son, I know I've seen a few. You're not responsible for somebody else's thrill. Your integrity's intact and you're still trying to climb the hill. I was a lonely man, I never thought it would come true. But sometimes in life, all you have are your dreams and you. That's when you realize that life ain't standing still. And all you can do is bow your head and accept God's will.